Welcome to Brainfluence. I'm Roger Dooley. I'm excited to have Paul Zak back on the show today. Paul is the founding director of the Center for Neuroeconomics Studies and professor of economics, psychology, and management at Claremont Graduate University, as well as founder of Immersion Neuroscience. He's been a pioneer in the study of oxytocin, a hormone with a deep connection to trust. His last book, Trust Factor, is one of my favorites. It's a business book based on science, and Paul is the rare academic who understands how business works. In fact, when people ask me the dreaded, what one book have you most often recommended, Trust Factor is my go-to answer. Paul, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks so much, Roger. Great to be back with you.
Paul, I've been thinking a lot about trust lately. I'm curious, since Trust Factor came out, do you have any new insights about trust, either in business or in general?
Yeah, I think we've been looking at some of the precursors to trust. So how do we design environment situations so that trust can be sufficiently high? And we found that psychological safety is really the precursor to trust. So if I have low psychological safety, my anxiety's high, I'm just trying to hold on for the next, 2 seconds, and I can't actually connect to other people. I'm not a very good colleague. And but being able to measure that in real time physiologically has been, for a lot of companies, a real game changer. So I can know right away, do I have the preconditions to actually build trust?
Right now, Paul, I think we are at a trust inflection point in the U.S. We've just seen the CDC relax their mask guidelines for vaccinated people, and businesses like Costco, Walmart, and others are responding by changing their own mask requirements. In general, the policy is to not require masks for vaccinated shoppers, but they can't verify every customer's vaccination status. They're using an honor system. They have to trust their customers because they can't turn their employees into the mask police. At the same time, I'm hearing rumblings from some shoppers that they don't really trust their fellow shoppers. Are they really vaccinated, or do they just not like masks? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I think, trust is the lubricant, social lubricant around us. So yeah, we have to have some degree of trust, or we just can't go through life. But also worry about employees, right? So now if I have a lot of unmasked customers, do I feel comfortable giving great customer service? Am I able to, work in a team with my unmasked colleagues? And so I think, again, that's where measurement comes in. So I'm always going to put my science hat on and go, I think asking people is important, but also kind of establishing those conditions. So it could be more frequent breaks, more chance to wash your hands, maintaining social distance. I had a handshake. I told you I traveled last week. Someone shook my hand. It was so weird. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I? Do I have to wash this now? What's the story? So I think we're all trying to figure this out. And I do believe tolerance is the important watchword here, right? So when I'm really, really sensitive that, everyone's anxiety level is going to be all over the map, and it's tough. It was, it was fun to be on an airplane and fun to be there, but, lift your mask, sip a drink. It's not really, that's not going to survive. So I think we all have to acclimate to the mask-free lifestyle eventually.
Yeah, I had a similar handshake experience, Paul. Just a week or so ago, I met up with a few local colleagues here in Austin and ran into somebody that I hadn't seen in a year, and instinctively stuck out my hand. We shook hands, and then I think both of us immediately wondered, oh, gee, were we supposed to do that or not? So I think there's probably a lot of that going on around the country. So, Paul, I want to learn more about Immersion Neuro. I know, according to Crunchbase, back in December, you raised $1 million, so congratulations on that. And the basic principle seems to be that you are doing, in essence, what are something like neuromarketing studies, if you will, using smartwatches. And this is something that I told your colleague, your CEO, that for probably 5 years or so, I've had a slide in many of my decks that shows a picture of a smartwatch, typically the Apple version, and with something like the future of neuromarketing. Now, so far that hasn't panned out. So when I saw your company, I said, oh, okay, hey, maybe I was actually right. Can you explain a little bit more about Immersion Neuroscience, what they do, what the technology is, and so on?
Right. So we have democratized neuroscience. So this, grew out of work in my academic lab, in which we identified the signals in the brain that together would tell us how much your brain values that experience. So when the experience is valuable, you'll remember it, you'll act on it, you'll share it. Those are all things that marketers care about. And so again, we had these $100,000 machines and a room full of PhDs. And as companies started asking us to help them, we kind of realized the problem is I'm a weirdo. You don't want to talk to me, right? And I'm too expensive and I'm too slow. So, we began to automate all this signal processing. And once we did that, we realized, like, why do we need the $100,000 machines? We've been testing wearables for quite a while. And, 10, 12 years ago, the data quality was quite poor. But in essence, we have democratized neuroscience by creating a SaaS platform that lets anybody measure what the brain loves in real time, any place people are. So absolutely remote, can be synchronous, can be asynchronous. You can send them a video, send them audio, and actually measure second by second how much the brain cares about this. So a lot of our clients are in the entertainment space, movies, TV networks, in the training and education space. And one of the great things about COVID has been, this kind of explosion of ed tech abilities to really capture the best teachers in the world and see if they're really connecting to students. So we have ed tech companies using our technology, and certainly the advertising marketing world. Instead of just sort of throwing spaghetti on the wall and hoping something sticks online, now we can actually test. So we see immersion as workflow software. We have partners that have panels of people with smartwatches with the app already on it. So anyway, that's what we really care about, is creating extraordinary experiences for customers, from advertising to marketing to in-store. And ultimately, immersion is designed to be a prediction engine, not a feeling engine. So I don't believe in feelings. So think of my poor wife who has to live with me for all these years. Feelings are too fleeting. So what we did when we built immersion was identified the signals in the brain that told us that people would take an action, or highly accurately predictive that people would take an action after a message or an experience, and then worked backwards to reverse engineer what these signals were.
When you say in real time, Paul, what sort of time granularity do you have? I'm thinking that your original oxytocin studies were typically a sample before and a sample after when you were doing blood draws, like a sample before some kind of intervention or action or experience, and then after. Obviously, if you're getting continuous data from a wristband of some kind of smartwatch, you don't necessarily have that limitation. But how fine-grained is that time understanding? Like if people are watching a commercial or a TV show or a trailer for a movie or something else?
Yeah, so we get 1 second frequency data. So we're getting electrical signals. We actually can get it at higher than 1 second frequency, but I don't think anybody really needs that. So we should say that a lot of the early research is funded by DARPA, by different agencies in the U.S. government that, as you can imagine, are interested in predicting what people will do after a communication or an experience. And so U.S. taxpayers were kind to give us millions of dollars to really understand not only the signals coming out of the brain, and particularly the signals from the cranial nerves, but we can evolve them in ways that are not natural. So, we really optimize the combination of signals so that we are able to predict consistently with 80% plus accuracy things like sales bumps from advertising, TV ratings for reality TV shows, movie ticket sales, information recall. So that's one of the nice things. So there's about a 0.6 correlation between immersion and information recall. So the more immersive you can make this communication or experience or ad, the more people are going to stick this in memory. So one way to think about immersion, which I didn't define, by the way, immersion is a neurologic state in which you're attentive and you're emotionally resonant with the experience. You're sharing the emotions of that communication, let's say. So the attention is dopaminergic. I've got to focus somewhere. But most of the variation second by second in immersion comes from this emotional component. How much do I actually care about this experience? And as you know, Roger, the brain's a very energy-hungry organ. And so to get me to care about this is metabolically costly. And so I've got to actually create a narrative. I've got to create some tension. I've got to have a reason to keep watching. Otherwise, I'll just switch off. So just as an aside, we are finishing up some research in my academic lab showing that we can predict how long people watch a piece of video as a function of their immersion. So the more immersed they are, the more likely they are to watch it. Even though we let them click out anytime they want to, So it's really sucking people in. So, think about immersion as like, the opening of every James Bond movie that we've ever seen. James Bond running across the rooftop, and there's some damsel in distress and he's going to save, and bullets are bouncing at his feet. Well, if you watch that, your heart rate goes up, your palms sweat. You start to share the emotions as if you have transported yourself into that movie. And so that's what immersion is capturing, is that emotional transportation into an amazing ad or experience or video or movie.
So it's sort of an engagement metric, you could say as well, I suppose, that people are actually engaging with the content in an emotional or other way. And I think that probably there's a good lesson there from James Bond movies. I think everyone since the first couple have used that same approach of having an eye-popping action sequence to start the movie, and then went into the titles, compared to I think in the early years, the traditional approach was to start a movie with the titles. Who's in it? What's the name of it? Who directed it? And they kind of broke that mold by both having very unusual animated title sequences, but also starting right with the action before they got to the slower paced title piece. And I think that many marketers and content creators could learn from that.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we find you've got 15 seconds to get people to care about the experience. If you don't get them in the first 15 seconds, they're generally going to tune out neurologically. And the other thing that we're seeing clients use, again, this is full self-service. This is a game changer, because you don't need to see me. It's like a PhD in a chip. It's all in the cloud. And real time was hard. It took me a couple of years to write really efficient algorithms to be able to do this in real time. But you can watch that data come in, whether it's a synchronous event, we're all like right now, or, sending out stuff asynchronously. As that data comes in, it begins to accumulate, and you can actually watch it. And it's super weirdly compelling to look at people's brains respond to some content you created or an experience you created. But also it allows you to look at the distribution of those individuals. So who are the super fans for your experience? And we see clients often find these little golden nuggets where, we thought our target demographic was X, but we find that we have a subset of people in a totally different demographic or psychographic who are in some area that we really didn't know about. So we always recommend that clients, kind of go broad. Even if you think you know your demographic, you may find this little nugget here of people who dig it. And if they're super fans, let them help you. They want to help you. They are turned on by this thing. Encourage them to share on social media. Have them invite a friend to your website. Whatever that is, you can reward them. You can give them a badge, give them a sticker, whether in person or online. Send them, what does this thing cost? It costs, I don't know, 50 cents. Send them a sticker. They're super fans, or give them an attaboy on social media. So there's so many ways to keep people engaged when you know how much they care about your experience.
That makes a huge amount of sense. And I think, too, if you can engage those super fans, even if whatever content you're creating isn't off to a tremendously brisk start, then sometimes those are the people that can keep it alive long enough for it to catch on. Because I'm sure, you talk about seeing if a TV show will do well in the first 90 seconds. And I can see how that would be the case, because a lot of people are going to tune out after that. But certainly there are some TV series, particularly scripted series, that really start with kind of a slow burn. People take a few episodes to get into it, to know the characters, and then they become fans and draw more people in. So that's great. So, if somebody wants to measure the potential impact of whatever it is they're creating, do they form their own panels of their own customers, their own users, or is this sort of part of a SaaS model where you've got panels of people who are ready to look at your stuff?
Great question. All those. So again, this is workflow software. So just like you would test anything you're doing, a lot of clients in the creative spaces will just grab some people from the accounting department and go, look, we have some roughs. We want to show this to you. We're going to use your wearable, or we brought a couple wearables. And so we find you can get nice directional signals by measuring as few as 7 or 8 people. Like, I have a bunch of roughs. Let's just show them to some folks. So it gets out of that. Well, Roger likes this and Paul likes that. And to me, liking is the wrong question, right? I don't really care if you like this. And we've compared liking to immersion, and I'll tell you about that in a second. What I care about, does it stick in your brain so much that you remember it and act on it? That's what we really care about to get a return on the investment. So we find a zero correlation between liking, self-reported liking, and immersion. And this is true for Super Bowl ads. It's true for TV shows. It's on and on and on. So I think the liking question is asking people to reveal their unconscious emotional states, and we just can't do that with any fidelity. So, and by having this data second by second, you can begin to edit this. So, I think liking is the wrong question. Now, we do find that highly immersive experiences are enjoyable, but we're going backwards. We're saying, is this tattooing your brain so that it's stuck in there? So again, think of the most amazing experience of your life: a birth of a child or a grandchild. You just had a grandchild. I don't know, 9/11. Right? Those are tagged with emotion. So that's what immersion is picking up, is that emotional tagging that says, hey, this is valuable. So it's saved in the brain in a very particular way, and that's why it's so useful for advertising, for marketing, for movies.
You started off talking about psychological safety, and one of the claims on the Immersion Neuro website is that you can actually measure psychological safety, or the state that people are in. Explain that a little bit more.
Again, that's the kind of the precursor to having a great experience. Trust is a precursor to being immersed. So there's a moderate negative correlation between psychological safety and immersion. So again, if I don't have enough bandwidth in my brain because I'm not psychologically safe, I'm just not going to have a great experience, or I'm not going to be able to absorb the information in your ad. And so I think we dealt with the first physiologic measure of this, that we can pull data from these cranial nerves and look at arousal levels, essentially. And so if you're over aroused, you just don't have enough space in your brain. By the way, if you're under aroused, again, that sort of hot open of the James Bond, if you're under aroused, also immersion is going to be low. So we kind of want you in this middle space. So part of the immersion secret sauce captures arousal levels. And I do want you to have some reason to plug in. But again, most of that variation in immersion is due to this emotional component. So one of our clients, I won't say exactly what he said, but he said, "Oh, this is a give a S measure." I said, "Yeah, well, that's basically what we're capturing, is how much does your brain care about this thing, and caring is hard. I mean, metabolically is hard, right? So I think on content creators, on event organizers, on trainers." All those are asking the human brain to put a lot of energy into something that you want them to do, that they may not have capacity to do because they're not psychologically safe, or they're tired, or the content just not that good. So I know, Roger, we've talked about this a long time, but the whole arc of my career has been creating tools so that people live happier lives. And no one wants, a bad educational experience, a bad training. They don't want to watch bad ads. Bad movies. Oh, it's terrible. You watch the movie trailer and you go, really? They spent $50 million on this dog? Like, I can watch a trailer and tell you this thing's no good. So it shocks me that in this age of, human evolution, that we don't know a good story from a bad story. But I think the reason for that is we're using this biased measurement technology called our own brain and body. And so once we actually can do this objectively, well, now, get rid of the stuff that's not good fast, and, speed up production of those things that really are to create amazing experiences for clients and customers.
You mentioned cranial nerves. Now, explain more or less, how does a consumer device on your wrist measure activity in your cranial nerves?
Right. So because we had these millions of dollars from the U.S. government, we measured central and peripheral nervous system activity simultaneously. So then we used pharmaceuticals, so we actually can activate these pathways, and we can do a mapping from the areas in the brain that are associated with the attentional response and this oxytocin-driven emotional response, and then find that mapping from the cranial nerves into the head. So when we do high-density EEG or fMRI, you're getting locations, but you're not getting networks. This stuff is networked. And since the brain controls the heart, largely controls the heart, we can feed in heart rate and then infer via mathematics, what is actually going on in the brain. So Roger, I'm telling you as if I knew what the hell I was doing 5 or 10 years ago, and it was a lot of experimentation. We just tried this over and over and over. And almost all this is published. So everyone should be skeptical. I'm a skeptic by personality and by training as a scientist. You can put me in Google Scholar, download papers, read them for yourself. So almost all the details of this are published. The way we actually created these algorithms and the stuff on the website, that's not published. But everything else you can look at it and judge for yourself.
Yeah, you mentioned how quickly you can form conclusions about TV shows and such. On the website, there's one that 90 seconds were about as predictive as much longer segment. Are there cases where a more lengthy process makes sense, where maybe you do have to observe immersion, if you'll call it that, for 30 minutes or 60 minutes or something like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It depends on the client use. So I think in the movie industry, we certainly have clients that measure the entire movie. And then, for example, for roughs, so you're beginning the editing process, they'll do things like table reads. So we've actually seen interesting data on doing a table read for a script, which is super cool. And you can actually see where immersion, goes up and down. So again, it's really workflow software. And so, sometimes you want to measure the whole event. But yeah, these kind of short questions where that was a client like, hey, do we need to watch the whole movie or the whole TV show? Could we just do a minute and a half? I'm like, that's a damn good question. So the beautiful thing about democratizing neuroscience is there are zillions of interesting questions that I can't think of that clients, will engage with us on. And because it's self-service, they can measure as much as they want. It's a standard subscription software. So you subscribe, go to town. And some of the most interesting experiences I've seen honestly have been in classrooms. So pre-COVID, we have a bunch of students, a bunch of clients in the educational space. And, to see teachers looking at this data in real time and helping their class pivot towards more immersive experiences or knowing when they need a break by finding those kids, I call them super fans, finding those kids who love this class and can be discussion leaders. I mean, there's so many ways we can improve the experiences that we all have in the world. But I think what's been missing is easy measurement. And so that's what we try to do is easy onboarding. People go to the website, they can try it for free. So maybe I'm full of crap. Maybe it's possible. Probably not. But, so try it and see if it works for you. If it creates value, awesome. Sign up, subscribe, get more features. So we really want to, I'm passionate, as you know, about just creating better experiences for everybody in the world.
One of your case studies is TED Talks, and I guess they're a good tool because you can see how popular they are, and they're easily available for use as samples. And I don't know if you looked at how much of a TED Talk you had to watch before you could predict that it would be a highly viewed viral one, or maybe not so much.
Yeah, we didn't do that for that study, although that's another good question that we could do because we have all the data. But we found a 10% increase in immersion for a TED Talk resulted in 170,000 more online views. So, the size effects are really large for immersion. If you can get people to really get into your talk, it's going to pay off. So again, apply that to CEO presentations or, conference presentations. Really, if you want to have an impact, you can guess. I would say hope's not a strategy, but measurement is.
Right. Well, Paul, you and I both do some public speaking and training, and I had a vision of some guy in a dark booth at the back of the room having maybe a dozen members of the audience wearing smartwatches talking into my ear saying, okay, Roger, you better change it up. You're losing him. Or maybe just telling me, MC, okay, get that doofus off the stage. The audience isn't paying any attention at all. That's obviously an exaggerated example, but would something like that be possible?
Yeah, I think two ways. One, I think our clients in the events organization space use immersion to train people to be better keynotes. So rehearsal, right? So when I spoke at TED, I had about 10 months to prepare, but it was doing this. It was, by Zoom, and then I did some rehearsal in person. And, it was people giving me opinions, but why not have objective data? Like, did I really capture them? Was my big reveal in TED, exciting enough? So that's the first. I think the second is one of our longest term clients has been Accenture, that's been using our platform to optimize the training. They spend $1 billion annually to train their employees, future-proof their employees. That's an amazing investment. But they never had a great measurement technology. So what Accenture has found is what I'm calling the 20-20-20 rule. That's my term, not theirs, which is no matter how good a speaker you are or I am, Roger, people cannot stay immersed for more than about 20 minutes. And so they break up their training into 20 minutes of presentation, 20 minutes of participatory learning, so having those learners do something, and then 20 minutes of debrief. And they've also found that breaks are really important. So one of the learning architects at Accenture had a great phrase. Let me see if I can get it right. Maslow's hierarchy always wins. So if your butt hurts, if you have to pee, if you just, again, your psychological safety is lower, your bandwidth to learn is reduced, and so they're putting in actually longer breaks. So after an hour, they do like a half an hour break, and that seems weird, right? Because you say like we're adults. They found, for example, that the working lunch terrible. In that people need a break actually, and so not only were working lunches very low immersion, but it carried over to the session after lunch. So people just need a cognitive break, and so shorter, more intensive, more repetition, I think, is what we're seeing as important. And so again, I think you apply the same thing to advertising. Great stuff. Let me see it a bunch of times, stick that in my brain, and then I'm likely to remember it. And when I go into the store or search online and I see that logo, oh yeah, those guys, that was a great ad.
Could this technique be used to evaluate physical products?
Yeah, we have a client, a big electronics maker that is actually doing that in their testing facility in Europe. So they have people come in, they have a beautiful lab, and they have people use those products. And so you have cameras all around the room, and you can just overlay. Actually, the immersion platform will automatically overlay the immersion data with what they're using. And there are other ways to do that. You can show them aspects of the product via video if you want to do it asynchronously. Work great. And even live events. I took my team to Disneyland just before COVID, just for fun, and we all wore smartwatches, and we looked at standing in line. Disneyland is so famous for having these wonderful experiences as you're waiting to get on to that, attraction. And what we found is that not only was Disneyland in the 98th percentile for immersion, but sometimes the path through there was actually more immersive than the ride itself. So Disney has done a great job at capturing people's emotional state so that they're fully engaged in the whole process of getting on the attraction and on riding it.
Do you think there's a possibility or value in combining the smartwatch or wristband readouts with other techniques like either eye tracking perhaps or facial coding?
Yeah, facial coding pretty much has been blown out of the water academically. It just doesn't predict outcomes at all. So I think no one's really doing that much anymore. We have a couple clients that have done with eye tracking. So again, I think the eye tracking gets you visual attention, but it doesn't tell you about the valence, the emotional state. So I may look at something because I'm just confused or unhappy, or because I really love it. And so immersion allows you to differentiate those two. Certainly for online experiences, knowing where the eye is going is pretty important.
So what is the next step? Something that you can't do now, but hope to be able to do in the either not too distant or maybe a little bit farther out future?
Yeah, I think it's really, curating your entire life for greater happiness. So we have a number of clients that are building emotional wellness platforms that are using data from our wearable to capture what do you love in life, and particularly looking at more vulnerable populations. So imagine if you're doing this all day, and it could be at work. Like, what do you love doing at work? Well, you're going to put more discretionary effort in. It's just human nature. And what frustrates me at work? It's hard for me to articulate that, particularly to my boss. But if we agree to share data, and I go, man, I love accounting. I didn't know. It's just great. And then meeting with clients, not so much. So either train me on that or give me more of that. But more generally, what the big arc of my career and hopefully the company is just helping you figure out what really drives your happiness so you can live a more fulfilled life. And then, if you can, avoid those things that are neurologically frustrating, where you're doing them, but you just don't care about it. And so I think having that quantified self-knowledge about your emotional states really is the next frontier. So we want immersion to be the new steps. So steps was really cool for the 20th century, how much are you moving? But knowing what you really care about, that to me is the future.
Well, I think making people happier is an awesome goal and probably a pretty good place to wrap up, Paul. How can people find you and your ideas online?
Easy to find me. It's Get Immersion with an I, getimmersion.com. You can go on there and get a free trial and use it yourself. And if it's great for you, awesome. Subscribe. And if not, then hopefully it was amusing for a couple of weeks.
We will link there and to any other resources we spoke about on the show notes page at rogerdooley.com/podcast, where we will have video, audio, and formatted text versions of this conversation. Paul, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Roger.